Hi, I'm John Stevenson. We're going to be talking about a house divided, 1 Kings chapter 12. 1 Kings chapters 1 through 11, we've seen Israel united as one nation under the rule of first David and then Solomon. Now as we come to 1 Kings chapter 12, we're going to see the division of the nation. From henceforth there will be two kingdoms, the northern kingdom of Israel and the southern kingdom of Judah. So we're going to see Judah in the south and then Israel in the north. From now on, and we see in this chapter how it takes place, we're going to see two separate kingdoms, Israel and Judah. And so we begin, chapter 12, verse 1. Then Rehoboam went to Shechem. After all, Solomon had just died. Now his son, Rehoboam, goes to Shechem, for all Israel had come to Shechem to make him king. Shechem's this city, historic city, located between two hills, between two mountains, Ebal and Gerizim. Verse 2, now when Jeroboam, the son of Nebat, heard of it, remember Jeroboam had been given a prophecy that he would become the king of the northern tribes, but it hasn't happened yet. He was living in Egypt, for he was yet in Egypt, where he had fled from the presence of King Solomon. Then they sent and called him, and Jeroboam and all the assembly of Israel came and spoke to Rehoboam, saying, your father made our yoke hard, now therefore lighten the hard service of your father and his heavy yoke, which he put on us, and we will serve you. Notice what they're asking for. They're asking for a tax break. So you've got Rehoboam, and I know these names sound alike, Rehoboam versus Jeroboam. Rehoboam, he's the son of Solomon. He's heir apparent to the kingdom, and his father has just died, so it looks like he's going to be the next king. Jeroboam had been the former appointee over the labor projects of Solomon, but he had been fired from that job. He had fled down to Egypt when the news got out that it had been prophesied that he would receive half the kingdom. In the case of Rehoboam, he seems to be a young man. Jeroboam seems to be a bit older, seems to be a mature man. Rehoboam, he's from the tribe of Judah, although his mother is a princess of Ammon. Remember how Solomon had collected those various wives. This had been one of those. Jeroboam, by contrast, is from the tribe of Ephraim, that is from one of the tribes of the northern kingdom. Verse 5, then he said to them, depart for 3 days. That is, Rehoboam says this. He's been given an ultimatum. Depart for 3 days, then return to me. So the people departed, and King Rehoboam consulted with the elders who had served his father, Solomon, while he was still alive, saying, how do you counsel me to answer this people? And they spoke to him, saying, if you will be a servant to this people today, give them their tax break, in other words, and will serve them and grant them their petition and speak good words to them, then they will be your servants forever. Make them some campaign contributions. So notice what they say. If you'll be a servant to this people and serve them today, give them what they ask, answer them and speak to them good words, then they will be your servants forever. Verse 8, but he forsook the counsel of the elders which they had given him, and consulted with the young men who grew up with him. So I take these young men to be more his age. He's a young man and they're a young man. Those ones who grew up with him and served him. So he said to them, what counsel do you give that we may answer this people who have spoken to me, saying, lighten the yoke which your father put on us? Verse 10, the young men who grew up with him spoke to him, saying, thus you shall say to this people who spoke to you, saying, your father made our yoke heavy, you make it light for us. But you shall speak to them, my little finger is thicker than my father's loins. That sounds and is a bit graphic and crude and insulting. Notice what he continues, verse 11, whereas my father loaded you with a heavy yoke, I will add to your yoke. My father disciplined you with whips, but I will discipline you with scorpions. In other words, they're saying you need to get tough and show them who's boss. So we have a contrast here between the elders versus the young men. The elders had served as advisors to Solomon. The young men, they've grown up with Rehoboam. The elders say, be a servant to the people, grant them their petition, speak good words to them, give them campaign promises, lower their taxes, or at least promise to lower their taxes. The young men say, no, threaten the people with even greater burdens, show them who's boss, act kingly, and of course kingly in that era was thought to be act tough, be macho, and all of those things. Verse 12, then Jeroboam And all the people came to Rehoboam on the third day, as the king had directed, saying, "Return to me on the third day." The king answered the people harshly, for he forsook the advice of the elders which they had given him, and he spoke to them according to the advice of the young men, saying, "My father made your yoke heavy, but I will add to your yoke. My father disciplined you with whips, but I will discipline you with scorpions." And that is the advice that he takes and the advice that he uses. So what my father did, he made your yoke heavy. What I'm going to do, I'm going to add to your yoke. What my father did, he disciplined you with whips. What I'm going to do, I'm going to discipline you with scorpions. It's a figure of speech. In other words, you haven't seen anything in the way of harshness yet. I'm going to be much harsher than my father ever was. Verse 15, so the king did not listen to the people. And notice, for it was a turn of events from the Lord, that he, that is, that God might establish his word, which the Lord spoke through Ahijah. And we looked at Ahijah's words last time. The Ahijah, the Shilonite, to Jeroboam, the son of Nebat. Ahijah had prophesied that the kingdom would be torn, at least 10 tribes of the kingdom would be torn and given to somebody else. They'd be given to Jeroboam. And notice, it was happening through the king's free will. He's exercising his free will. But in reality, it's a turn of events from the Lord. The Lord is bringing this about. It's a reminder of something we read about in Proverbs chapter 21, where we read, the king's heart is like channels of water in the hand of the Lord. He, that is God, turns it wherever he wishes. God is in control of the free will of the king. Verse 16, when all Israel saw that the king did not listen to them, the people answered the king, saying, what portion do we have in David? We have no inheritance in the son of Jesse. To your tents, O Israel, now look to your own house, David. So Israel departed to their tents, but as for the sons of Israel, who lived in the cities of Judah, Rehoboam reigned over them. So we have a divided kingdom from this time on. Verse 18, then King Rehoboam sent Adoram, who was over the forced labor, and all Israel stoned him to death. Notice Rehoboam tries to act like nothing's happened, like he's still in charge. He sends his tax collector, his enforcer, and that enforcer is put to death. And King Rehoboam made haste to mount his chariot to flee to Jerusalem, because they put his forced labor leader to death. Next, they're going to put him to death if he hangs around. Verse 19, so Israel has been in rebellion against the house of David to this day. Now notice, to this day, wait a minute. Weren't First and Second Kings written by the time the captivity takes place? In other words, after Israel has already been taken into captivity long since? Well, this doesn't read like this. This actually reads like a diary, as though it is being written as it takes place. And I can't help but think that maybe that's the case, that these are part of ongoing annals they're collected at a later date and put together at a later date, but they're being written as they take place. Verse 20, it came about when all Israel heard that Jeroboam had returned, that they sent and called him to the assembly and made him king over all Israel. None but the tribe of Judah followed the house of David, and so we've had a division of the kingdom. Now, the leadership of Ephraim is seen where Ephraim, you see, remember, Jeroboam, he's from Ephraim. And Ephraim had complained to Joshua, who is also from Ephraim, by the way, about the relatively small size of their inheritance, going all the way back to the days of Joshua. And then you remember that the tabernacle was initially set up at Shiloh within the territory of Ephraim. So Ephraim has been a leader already, and now is continuing to take leadership. Back in the book of Judges, Gideon defeated the Midianites, and it was Ephraim who had complained that they'd not been invited to participate in the victory. Remember, Gideon had to sort of talk them down from that. Had meant to say, well, look, you're so big and strong and mighty, we didn't really want to bother you with these sorts of things. Ephraim had complained against Jephthah for not including them when he fought against the Ammonites. And of course, the truth had been that they had been invited to the battle and they'd refused to fight. But they tended to throw their weight around a lot. So chapter 12, verse 21, now when Rehoboam had come to Jerusalem, he assembled all the house of Judah And the tribe of Benjamin, that's also on his side, 180,000 chosen men who were warriors to fight against the house of Israel to restore the kingdom of Rehoboam, or to Rehoboam, the son of Solomon. So we're going to have a civil war, the south against the north, in order to bring the north back into the union, as the north has tried to secede from the union. Verse 22, but the word of God came to Shemaiah, the man of God. Here's another prophet, saying, speak to Rehoboam, the son of Solomon, king of Judah, and to the house of Judah and Benjamin, and to the rest of the people, saying, thus says the Lord, you must not go up and fight against your relatives, the sons of Israel. Return every man to his house, for this thing has come from me. God says, I brought this about. Yes, it was Rehoboam's bad decisions, but I was the one who had my hand in this. And so we read, they listened to the word of the Lord and returned and went their way according to the word of the Lord. And so, sure enough, Israel, Judah are going from this time on to be two separate nations, and they will remain two separate nations throughout the remainder of the book of 1st and 2nd Kings. Now, verse 25, then Jeroboam built Shechem, because after all, if Judah or Jerusalem has been and still is the capital of Judah, but now the northern kingdom is going to need their own capital, and so Jeroboam built Shechem. Remember Shechem, where they had met to make Rehoboam king, but that hadn't worked out for Rehoboam. Now Jeroboam built Shechem in the hill country of Ephraim and lived there. And when it says he built it, there was already a city there, but now it's built up into a larger city to become the capital. And he went out from there and built Penuel. And so we're going to have two capitals. One of these will be at Shechem, and the other one will be on the east side of the Jordan River at a place called Penuel. Penuel means face of God. Remember, this is the place where Jacob had wrestled with the angel and had named the place because he had seen the face of God, this angelic creature. And so this becomes his eastern capital. He's got both his western and his eastern capital. Verse 26, Jeroboam said in his heart, now the kingdom will return to the house of David, if this people go up to offer sacrifices in the house of the Lord at Jerusalem. Then the heart of the people will return to their Lord, even to Rehoboam, king of Judah, and they will kill me and return to Rehoboam, king of Judah. Jeroboam begins to think, wait a minute, if people they're going down to Jerusalem for the Passover and for Pentecost and for the Day of Atonement and for the Feast of Tabernacles, these 3 times a year they're going to Jerusalem for these feasts. And when they do, they will be subject to anti-Jeroboam propaganda, and after a while that may take its toll, and then they'll get rid of me and the kingdom will be restored, and I don't want the kingdom to be restored, and so Jeroboam is going to come up with a plan. Verse 28, so the king consulted and made 2 golden calves. Now you know where he got this idea from. It was back from the pages of the Older Testament, way back in the days of Exodus, when Aaron had made a golden calf. Well, he's going to double that. He's going to make 2 golden calves. And he said to them, it is too much for you to go up to Jerusalem. Behold your gods, O Israel, that brought you up from the land of Egypt. Verse 29, so he set up one in Bethel. Bethel is on the way down to Judah. It's as you go from Shechem down to Jerusalem, just before you get to the sort of the boundary line, you have Bethel. And the other he put way up in the north. He put in Dan. Dan is as far north as you can be and still be in Israel. Here's the high place at Dan. You can actually still go there and see the foundations. They put a sort of a metal frame where they believe the altar stood, and then you would go up the steps, and there would be a temple, and presumably the golden calf that he placed here at Dan would have been inside that temple. Verse 30, now this thing became a sin, for the people went to worship before the one as far as Dan. And this became a way for people, notice they're not worshiping other gods. They're worshiping the Lord, but they're worshiping the Lord through idolatry, through idols. They're saying these calves represent God, and that's idolatry. That is making graven images, and the Jewish people had been warned against that. Verse 31, and he made houses on high places and made priests from among all the people who were not sons of Levi. So he has his own temples, his own idols, his own priesthood, and he has abandoned the proper worship of the Lord. Verse 32, Jeroboam instituted a feast in the 8th month. Now remember, there was a feast on the 7th month, and there was a feast on the 1st month, the Passover, and then on the 7th month, what we call around September, there was the Yom Kippur and also the Feast of Tabernacles. But Jeroboam is going to put together a new feast, a feast in the 8th month on the 15th day of the month, like the feast which is in Judah. And he went up to the altar, which he did in Bethel, sacrificing to the calves which he had made, and he stationed in Bethel the priests of the high places which he had made. Verse 33, then he went up to the altar which he had made in Bethel on the 15th day of the 8th month, even the month which he had devised in his own heart, and he instituted a feast for the sons of Israel, and went up to the altar to burn incense, and he has led the nation into apostasy. So the sins of Jeroboam. First of all, notice the sins of worshiping in the wrong places. God had said the temple is to be the place where my name will be known, and Jeroboam is trying to get the people to abandon the temple and come to a new place of worship. And not only a wrong place, Deuteronomy chapter 12 verse 5 had said, you shall seek the Lord at the place which the Lord your God will choose from all your tribes to establish his name there for his dwelling, and there you shall come. And Jeroboam's trying to get them to leave that place. But also the sin of ordaining an alternative priesthood is taking place here, where Jeroboam is trying to get them to, he doesn't have priests, and he needs priests for this new system, and so he has ordained a alternate priesthood. There are also alternate feast days, which had not been ordained by God, and these, notice, they're not just, we're going to worship God on this day too, but these are meant to be replacing what God has already established. The Lord has already set a mandate, and the Lord had made a mandate for a Feast of Tabernacles on the 15th day of the 7th month, but now Jeroboam's compromise is to make it just like that, but it's going to be instead on the 15th day of the 8th month, so it's sort of like the previous one, but he has changed that. And then finally, the very obvious sin of idolatry. They are worshiping a gold calf, and perhaps they would have said, well, we're not worshiping the gold calf, we're just using that as a way to direct our worship to God. We are merely venerating it, we're not actually worshiping it. And you see, the language that I'm using is actually language that certain Christians have taken to say, we're just going to venerate icons, we're not worshiping icons or statues or things like that. But to an outsider, it certainly looks like worship. And perhaps here in this chapter, it looks like worship too. And so, in closing, let's look at a contrast between the southern kingdom of Judah and the northern kingdom of Israel. You're going to have in the southern kingdom of Judah, from now on, we'll see 19 kings. There will be one queen. And the northern kingdom of Israel, we're also going to see 19 kings. And you say, well, gee, that's about even. Except remember, the northern kingdom is going to be much shorter in length before they're taken into captivity. They're going to be taken into captivity in 721 BC. The southern kingdom is going to last for 150 years longer than that, which means that the average reign of the northern kingdom is going to be much briefer than that of the southern kingdom. The southern kingdom, its capital is in Jerusalem. The northern kingdom, its capital is in Shechem, although we're going to see Samaria later on added when we get to chapter 16. Southern kingdom of Judah, they have Judah, and we also saw Benjamin included that when they were about to go to war. The northern kingdom of Israel has the 10 northern tribes. With regard to the southern kingdom of Judah, all of the kings, well, some are unstable, some are good, some are bad. It's sort of a mixed bag as to the various kings. With the northern kingdom of Israel, they are all bad, and Ahab and Ahaziah, we'll see them later on, they're going to be not just idol worshippers, but they're going to be worshippers of Baal, a pagan false god, and that's going to enter into the picture as well. The southern kingdom will continue all the way up to 586 BC, and then they'll be conquered by Babylon. The northern kingdom will be taken away much earlier, 721 BC, they will be conquered by Assyria. The southern kingdom is going to return to the land after their conquest. They'll be in Babylon, but then in stages they will come back, first under Zerubbabel, and then quite a bit later under Ezra, and even Nehemiah will bring a few people back. With regard to the northern kingdom, we will not see them come back. There will be no return. They will remain scattered.